Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Ask Abhijit show. It's been a long time. I hope you're all doing very well, and I'm so glad to be back live on this long-standing podcast of mine. I hope you're all doing great. So, before we get into any questions, as always, let me see who all is live on the live chat, and let me greet you all. I can see Avnish, Arya Bhattacharya, Himanshu Sharma, Anup, Dev, Mohnish, Shivansh, Gurvit Singh Chauhan, Ojas, Shushrut, Dibyanshu, Avnish again, Apratihat, Priyanshi Sood, hello, Hitesh, Gaurav Thandan 85, Hajmola Singh, Aditya Ravi Kumar, Abhijit Reddy, Jasman Raj Singh, Komal, Pratyush, Jatin, GK, Geopolitical Dubey, hello sir. Ma'am, Manmat Tiwari, Dev, Aman Vakil, Sabana, hello. Barno, Ritvik, Shri Krishna, Shivam Singh, Sagar, hello. Bimla, Karthik, Dr. Jaishankar, Supremacy, hello. Feminist Impaler, Ritik Kutari, Joyal, Yungi Manar, Namaste. Nomad Roni, Lol, No, Om Berikar, hi, Om Bekherikar, Jitendra, Dr. Atul, Karan Nalawat, Jai Shri Ram, Shriya Jain, hello, the Indic Gal, yes, back after a long time, Samar, Pavan, Anirudh, Uncle Sam, Vivek, Mansi, 9 p.m., Surinder, Otaku reference, Pratyush, Hajmola Singh again, Samarth Gandhi, Namaste, Monish Sabarinath, hello, Jai Hind. Uh, who else do we have? Uncle Biden 420, Karan Nalawat, hello. I can see Somalia Paul, Surendra Gupta, Ajit Avnish, Gopi Sunny Show, Jairaj Saraf, The Beyonder, Doga, Shriya, TTG, Sahil, Act Dimensions, Kashyap, Namaste, Anshuman, Bahuguna, Shrikant, Sunny, and so many other people, Sid, Dave, uh, Kumal, Amir Gardia, Chess Shastra, Frank Acosta, Bhavik Vadera, Joseph Matthew. Hi, after a long time, yes, indeed. Uday Kumar, good evening. And everybody else. So, yeah, I'm going to stop greeting you all. It's been, I think, more than 3 minutes I've been greeting you all. So, let's stop there. As always, you all have asked lots and lots and lots of questions. Aditya ji, thank you very much. Nice to have you online. Hello. Uh, Yes, yes. Not missing, just working. And yeah. So uh let's see what questions we have. You all have asked lots of questions as always. Let me see what do we have. Um but what we can do is there are lots of people online as well. So why don't we start with some online questions? Right? And in case there is some noise in the background, please excuse me for that. This is the festive season, and here in India people like to blast music on full volume. So in case you're hearing some noise in the background, I would apologize. I hope it's not that audible, but yeah. So let us take some questions. Let us take some questions and see what we have. Mm, and let's talk about, first of all, let me put some music in the background. Never tried that before, but let me see. Let me put some music in the background so that in case you're hearing any noise, it will be drowned out. There we go. uh and in case it's too loud, let me know, and I will I will try and fix it. Okay, so Akshat is saying it's not audible. That's great. That's great. Okay, that's fantastic. um okay, let us see. What questions do we have? Okay. So Ayan says views on World Cup. I think India is doing well in the World Cup. Yes. uh, I think India is doing reasonably well. I think India has won all of its matches, and it's interesting that in certain Indian stadiums there is support for certain teams. I mean, I have not really followed the Pakistan matches. Yes, I saw yesterday the South Africa defeated Pakistan. I was like, I saw the last 5 minutes or so, and it's interesting that in certain stadiums there is a certain amount of support for teams like Pakistan and Bangladesh in India, which I find surprising. I mean, it's fine to support other teams as well when your team is not playing, but for Indians to support Pakistan or to wear Pakistan t-shirts or whatever, I think it's not quite right. So yeah, I found that surprising. I found that surprising. Yeah. Okay. So okay, so everyone's saying there's no music, there's no noise in the background, which is great. All right, fantastic. Um, Samarth Acharya says, why is sub-Saharan Africa always in crisis? I think we should see the map for that so that we understand what we mean by sub-Saharan Africa. Let me quickly put a map on the screen. Give me a second or so. As always, the map is our best friend. And if we see the map, we understand context. So let us bring the map on the screen. Yeah. So what is sub-Saharan Africa and why is this place always in crisis? Let's close this. Yeah. So sub-Saharan Africa is essentially this entire belt above the green area. Okay. You can see the green area, which you can see Nigeria here, right? Nigeria, it's kind of green. So above the green area, you have this region called sub-Saharan Africa. It's also called the Sahel region of Africa. And it's called the coup belt in Africa. It's always a place where you have coups, lots of coups. I mean, if you go to I don't know, whatever online resource you have and see the list of coups in the past 10, 20 years, you're gonna see a whole list of coups in these nations, right? A very unstable region. You have dictatorships that are propped up in these nations, and these are propped up by the West, either by France or certain other nations, right? And recently, Niger has been in the news because there's been a coup there, a popular coup, a coup that's supported by the population, and they've got rid of the French ambassador and the French military from the nation. Niger obviously is a nation that is, like I've spoken on many occasions, it's rich in uranium. It's one of the top 10 uranium producers in the world, and it's one of the major suppliers of uranium to France. I mean, the French were getting uranium from Niger at less than $1 a kilo. Yeah, when the actual market price is around 150 to $200. So that's how they were stealing uranium from Niger, and now that's kind of come to an end. So why is sub-Saharan Africa always in crisis? It's like, why is the Middle East always in crisis? It's always an external hand. Okay. So one thing about Africa that you will notice in this region is that you have so many straight line boundaries, international borders that have straight lines. So these are borders that were arbitrarily drawn by the West, by the Europeans in the 19th century and in the 20th century also, yeah, arbitrarily to divide up Africa among themselves. So what these straight line borders do is that they cut across, tribal boundaries and ethnic boundaries. So half of a tribe or a half of an ethnic group is found in one on one side of the border and another on the other side of the border. These are unnatural, non-organic borders, and because of this you have ethnic groups that typically did not live together, who are forced to live together somehow in one nation. So that causes civil wars, and that's by design. So when you have these nations that are embroiled in civil wars and ethnic strife and whatnot, then you can install dictators and you can have foreign interference in the nation in the name of bringing stability and human rights and all, democracy and all that. And yeah, it's all about resources at the end of the day. Africa is extremely rich in various kinds of resources, natural resources, mineral resources, gold, uranium, copper, whatnot. You can think of it all, and it's all there. And so the West, what it does is it keeps these regions, these nations in a constant state of crisis, so that it can then interfere in the nations, put their own puppet dictators in place, or have UN or whatever other group that comes and meddles in the internal matters of the nation. And by doing all this, they're able to extract natural resources out of these countries. The French have what they call the CFA franc, which comes in two flavors. So it's the currency that the French government issues, and it is used by a large number of nations in this region, right? And that is one way of controlling the economies of these nations. And this the CFA franc has a straight conversion rate with the euro, which the French decide. The 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 you know the finances, the exchequer of these many of these nations, they all the money is deposited in French banks. So that's how you have this state of neo-colonization that still exists in Africa, in this region, sub-Saharan Africa, and other parts of Africa as well. But sub-Saharan Africa is where you have the French, who have a very strong stronghold or stranglehold in this region. And nowadays it's become, the place where you are seeing new manifestations of the new Cold War in this region, because the Russians have got involved, the Chinese have been involved for the past 10, 20 years. So a lot going on. So just like the Middle East, it's an artificial crisis that's been induced and kept going on in perpetuity for decades, right? And in both cases, it's the West that is responsible for that. So that is a brief overview of how things are in this region. So yeah, good question. Now let's see something else. Okay. Nitish says, "What's the status of Tibet now? Where is Tibet? Let's take a look at Tibet. Where is Tibet? In case some of us don't know, let me put that on the screen. Where is Tibet? Okay, let's make it a little larger. Tibet is this region north of India. It was historically called Bhot Desh. Bhot. I don't know why it's called Tibet. The Westerners have decided to mangle all Eastern names. Yeah, so it's called uh, Tibet. So what's the status? It's under Chinese occupation, right? That's the status of Tibet. The Tibetans have become a minority in their own land. You have the Chinese Communist Party flag that flies over Lhasa, over the Potala Palace. The Tibetans, they are slowly being, their culture is being wiped out, their language is being wiped out. Their children are forced to do their schooling in Chinese, in the Chinese Mandarin language. So yeah, that's what's happening. That's the status of Tibet right now. Tibet historically has been a nation that's been a buffer between two great civilizations, India and China. China has historically never had any right, any claim whatsoever on Tibet, but right now they have claimed it because of the uh, decisions taken by the Nehruvian government in the 1950s. To a large extent, they allowed this to happen. So that's the status of Tibet right now. Tibet is a nation under occupation, and it's being slowly squeezed to death, essentially. Yes, that's what. Sagar says, "Les Français sont riches grâce à l'Afrique." That is true. It is very true. The French are prosperous because of Africa, because of the wealth and resources they extract out of Africa. Um, uh, okay, what else do we have? Okay, Kashyap says, "What are your views on India's no vote abstention in the recent Hamas conflict?" There was a vote yesterday or day before yesterday in the UN about some resolution, and India abstained in this. US said, "Don't stop." I don't care what the US says. What did India do? India abstained. So I think it was something about condemning Israel or something or the other, and India stayed out of it. So I think, see, look, what's happening in the Middle East, it's unfortunate. Clearly, Hamas started it. Okay, I don't care what anyone says. If it upsets people, so be it. It was started by Hamas, and with their act of horrific terrorism that they perpetrated on the people of Israel, and then Israel has retaliated. Maybe they have retaliated excessively or not. In these things, in geopolitics, in warfare, there is no right, there is no wrong. It's only about who can prevail. So India has, I think, wisely stayed out of this. As soon as this act of terrorism by Hamas happened, the Prime Minister of India was very clear. He went on Twitter and said that he called this an act of terrorism, right? And he clearly said that India stands with Israel. So I think that's overall India's official stand. Historically, India has had kind of some kind of sympathy towards the aspirations and all that of the Palestinian people, but you can't resort to terrorism. So that's what's happened, and I think India is doing a wise thing by staying out of this conflict, not picking one side or the other. We don't have a horse in this race. We don't have a dog in this fight. With all due respect to both sides, so I think, yeah, India is doing the right thing by not taking sides and staying out of it. But obviously, India will always unequivocally condemn any act of terrorism, no matter who does it. And what Hamas did was an act of horrific terrorism, and India clearly stood with Israel uh, over that. Okay. Om Bekerikar raises an important question. What can India do to free 8 Navy veterans from Qatar? So, what's the deal with Qatar? Okay, lots of people are very upset with good reason. So, first of all, where is Qatar? Let's take a look at Qatar. We have to always use the map to orient ourselves. We know where India is. Now, let's look in India's extended neighborhood. Okay, go westwards, you have the Sea of Saurashtra, which is erroneously called the Arabian Sea. Then you have what they call the Gulf of Oman, and then you have the Persian Gulf. In the Persian Gulf over here, northwest of the UAE, we have Qatar. This little nation over here. Okay, so this tiny little nation that is smaller than Sri Lanka uh, has uh, has first of all, they've been holding these eight Indian Navy veterans in prison for over a year, and this week it has been announced that they have sentenced these eight Indian Navy veterans to death. And apparently the charge is that they have accused them of spying on behalf of Israel. Okay, that's the thing. So yeah, so that is the situation that we find ourselves in now. Lots of Indians are angry because Qatar is this tiny little nation, smaller than Sri Lanka, and it is taking such actions against an enormous, large nation like India. And people are saying that the Modi government has failed, and they are able to do nothing. Even if a small, tiny nation does this, we are able to do nothing. We have to understand the big picture perspective over here. What is the significance of Qatar in world affairs, right? Uh, what is Qatar standing in the world? So first of all, you may remember the 2022 World Cup, Football World Cup, took place in this nation, Qatar. So this tiny, apparently insignificant nation, which is actually a nation which is a very hot climate, not suitable for football, was able to win, the rights to host the World Cup 2022. So understand that when it comes to events like big global events like the Olympics, the Football World Cup, and so on and so forth, when a nation is awarded this, it's essentially kind of you could say a reward for certain services that this nation has offered to the big powers, to the great powers. And when it comes to the so-called rules-based world order and all that, the great power is the US. And we also have to remember that Qatar is a nation that hosts the US military on its territory. Okay, there's at least one US military base on Qatar territory. Qatar is also the nation that has hosted the diplomatic talks between the United States and the Taliban regime before Afghanistan was handed over back to the Taliban. Okay, so Qatar has was part of that. Qatar was the place where all of this happened. Qatar is so Qatar has, and if you look at the past 20-30 years of history, Qatar has always participated in various US military operations, whether it is the first Gulf War, the second Gulf War, the US invasions of Iraq, which happened in the 90s and in 2003, if I'm not mistaken. Qatar has participated in that. So Qatar essentially is a nation that has historically provided a great amount of service to the United States. You can think of it as a US vassal state, as one of the United States key vassal states. And Qatar is one of the major exporters of global exporters of liquefied natural gas, LNG. India, I think, receives about half of its LNG from Qatar. Okay, and India has a significant expatriate population in Qatar. I don't know how many lakhs, maybe 4 or 5 lakhs. I don't remember the exact figures. Go and look it up. Okay, so Qatar, even though it is a tiny, apparently insignificant nation, okay, it has the full backing, so to say, of the United States of America. And when you have the backing of a superpower, then you can afford to do certain things. So then the question is, why did Qatar do this? I mean, clearly this is see, first of all, Qatar is not a nation that executes people routinely. Okay, it's very rare for them to execute anybody. So they have impose the death penalty on 8 Indian naval veterans. This is a pressure tactic of some kind on India. And where is the pressure coming from? It's clearly not coming from Qatar. Qatar is a tiny nation. It's merely a pawn on the larger geopolitical chessboard. And who is holding that pawn is the question. It most likely is the US. Okay. So India in recent times has scored a number of victories. The G20 was a big win for India. India obviously is rising economically. The US needs India as a counterweight to China, but the United States is also quite wary of India. Okay, India is a nation that is it's the only major nation, it's the only major economy that has zero chance of recession, which means India is going to keep growing steadily at a good percentage, at a good rate for the next 10-20 years. Okay, and if India keeps on growing, it's 7 8 9%, maybe even 5 6% per year for the next 20 years, India is going to become a genuinely major economy, and a genuinely great world power. Okay, so the US doesn't want to repeat the mistake it did with China. It sees India as a long-term threat on the long-term horizon. By 2040, India could be the next future China. That's what they worry about. So they would like to keep India down. So they will cooperate with India and collaborate with India when it comes to various things that involve countering China, because India also needs a counterweight to India also needs any support it gets against China. So when it comes to the things like the Quad, various Indo-Pacific initiatives, and so on, the US will cooperate with India. But the US will also oppose India and hamper India and hinder India's growth in a number of ways. So that's the kind of dual game or complex game they are playing when it comes to India. Okay. Uh, so when this sort of thing happens, when a tiny, insignificant nation has the temerity to impose the death penalty on 8 Indian naval veterans, what happens? The people of India, we know, are very emotional. They'll say, oh, it's a failure of the Modi government. Modi is weak, blah, blah, blah. What foreign policy, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So that's the objective. It's to make this government look weak. Why? Because we have 2024 coming up. And India needs a political continuity. India needs political stability. If you have a coalition government that comes up, then it's going to be a disaster for India, because India will not be able to pursue a strong, robust foreign policy and a strong, robust economic policy. So they would love, the Americans and the Chinese as well, would love to see a weak government come to power in 2024 in India. So how do you make this happen? You take a number of actions that make the current government look weak, and you do things that are out of the control of the Indian government. So you take some random people in Qatar who are working in some company in Qatar, you imprison them. After 1 year, you impose a death penalty. And then it makes the government of India look weak. Well, you know what? As India rises, this is going to happen more and more. Okay, there's going to be pushback from people, from forces that do not want to see India rise. And India has an enormous diaspora, millions of Indians who live and work all across the world. It's going to be so easy to target Indians, okay, outside of India. So they won't do it most likely in the West, because the West believes in the rule of law, blah blah blah. But they will use these rogue states, the rogue actors like Qatar and God knows what, to keep on pressurizing India. So this is the price that you pay when you start rising. Okay, so India needs to have the appetite to be able to withstand all this, instead of getting all emotional and wishy-washy and weepy. Oh, this happened, that happened. Come on, grow up. This is what happens. So eventually India will have to take certain actions. So for example, when the West imprisons a Chinese, let's say, a high-ranking Chinese official of some Chinese company, what the Chinese do is that they will imprison 2 3 Western business people in China on trumped up charges. Okay, so obviously that's something we can't do when it comes to Qatar, because it's such a tiny nation. We may have maybe 12 Qataris on Indian territory or whatever, right? So even India will have to come up with ways of dealing with this. But I would not say that this is a failure of the government. I mean, any rogue nation can imprison 12 Indians somewhere, and India cannot start invading every nation, right? Every nation has its own laws and all that, and India also, if you look at Indian prisons, we have citizens of other nations in our prisons. So this is something that is going to happen. I would imagine it will happen more and more as India starts rising. India keeps rising, and the world gets really prickly and jealous about this. They're going to try and pull these stunts, to make the Indian government look weak. So this is something that India will have to learn how to deal with. So that's where we are. What can India do to free these 8 people from Qatar right now? We can, I'm sure we will ask them to follow the rule of law. We can engage them diplomatically, try and put pressure in some way or the other. So I'm sure there are various diplomatic means, that we have at our disposal, diplomatic means, and maybe some other means as well. I would not say we have to go take military action for 12 people, um, but yeah, we will have to find some way. of dealing with this. Okay, right. A good question. Harsh says Qatar has been providing monthly aid to Hamas. How does this benefit Qatar in all this? So yeah, the Hamas leadership is based in Qatar. Okay, which which tells you Qatar is an important proxy for various maybe excuse me, for the US perhaps, or for somebody else. So the Middle East is constantly in turmoil. The Hamas leadership is living in Qatar, the top leadership. They're living in luxury while you know what's happening in Gaza. People are being bombed by the Israelis, and the leadership lives in Gaza. How does this benefit Qatar? Well, you see, mm, like I said, the Middle East is constantly in crisis, just like Western Africa, the Sahel region is constantly in crisis. And all of this crisis is engineered from outside of these regions. It's the West, it's the West that wants these regions to be always in crisis so that they can extract geopolitical benefits out of it. So when you have, so let's say the US wants the Middle East to be constantly in crisis. So they need a good guy, they need a bad guy. For them, the official good guy is Israel, and the official bad guy is Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran and so on and so forth. Now, see, Hamas, it is based in the Gaza Strip, which has a roughly 50-kilometer border with Israel. If the top Hamas leadership were to live in Gaza, it would be very easy for the Israelis to take them out, because the Israelis are known to target, and assassinate, to do targeted assassinations of anti-Israel forces. So the best way to prevent that from happening is to ensconce the top leadership of Hamas in Qatar, where they are kind of out of reach of Israel. And since Qatar is a small territory, there is a good security there, and everything can be monitored properly. So yeah, so I would say that the US has a very long history of playing both sides. I mean, they are the ones who created Osama bin Laden. They are the ones who created Saddam Hussein. Okay, let's not even talk about Al Qaeda and the Black Flags and ISIS. Let's not even go there. So the Americans have a long history of playing both sides. When it suits them, terrorists will become freedom fighters and resistance fighters and moderates. And when it doesn't suit them, they have to be smoked out and dealt with. So I think it is not beyond the US to even ensure that the Hamas top leadership stays in safety in Qatar while keeping the entire Middle East region up in flames. So that's what I would say. All right. um, After this Israel-Hamas conflict is over, will we see changed international map boundaries with no disputed territories remaining anymore there? You will never ever have settled international boundaries. You will never ever have all territorial disputes anywhere settled. Okay, it's never ever going to happen. If you look at the past 2,000 years of history, which is a small sliver of overall history, you will find that international boundaries and borders always constantly change. They don't change on a week to week basis, but they change on a decade to decade basis. If you look at the borders over a century, just a century, not even 2,000 years, you will see changes. Whether it is India, whether it is Afghanistan, whether it's the Middle East, whether it is Central Asia, whether it is North and South America, whether it is the US Mexico border, whatever, it always keeps changing. So whenever this Israel Hamas conflict is over, you will most likely see some changes, most likely in some of these borders, because it is a distinct possibility, if the great powers are not careful, that this conflict which is currently waging between Israel and Hamas, and maybe Israel and Hezbollah, it may suddenly expand beyond this territory. Okay, because there is going to be a significant temptation among the Islamic world to take action against Israel, especially if the people of Gaza suffer too much. Okay, and there is this, the Islamic world is not a unified monolithic block. They have lots of frictions, they have lots of divisions, they have lots of rivalries, they have lots of conflicts among themselves. Okay, look at the history since 1950. You will see that they fight each other all the time. So there is there is this competition right now, and it's always been there. There is this competition for the leadership of the Islamic world. Who will take up the leadership and who will proclaim themselves the leaders of the Islamic world? So who are the candidates? One is obviously Iran. the regime of the Ayatollahs. They would like to take up the mantle of the leaders of the Islamic world. The other, obviously, candidate is Saudi Arabia. The traditional home of Islam. The king of Saudi Arabia is the protector of Mecca and Medina, right? So there is that. Then you have Turkey. Turkey. I don't know what they call themselves nowadays, Turkey or whatever. So they were the last great Islamic power, the Ottoman Empire, and they would love to see that happen again, the Ottoman Empire to be revived. And then we also have Egypt, that also has at some point in history, held the caliphate. So we have four powers, let's say Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey. And they don't all get along together. There is significant rivalry and jealousy among these guys. So when you have this situation where Gaza is under siege and Israel, the Yahudis, are bombarding Gaza, one of these nations would love to take the first step in smashing Israel. But obviously, it's easier said than done. Israel is not some pushover. Israel is a very powerful nation, in this region. So if the nations, the great powers are not careful, this could very rapidly expand. This war could very rapidly expand beyond where it is right now. And if one of these big nations gets involved, everybody else will want to rush in, and that's going to be a disaster. It's gonna be a disaster for the world economy, and so on. So yeah, that's the deal. So even if borders change, there's still gonna be disputes. There are still going to be disputes. That is a given. Right. What the Sun Eater says, are we sleepwalking into World War III? If we are not careful, we will sleepwalk into I don't know if it will be World War III, but it's going to be a larger conflagration beyond the region where it is right now, the east bank of the Mediterranean. It could very rapidly expand beyond that, especially if Iran gets involved or Turkey gets involved. Turkey is always tempted to get involved in various things. They are a very aggressive, belligerent nations with huge, outsized ambitions of reviving the Ottoman Empire. So yeah, we need to be very careful. India needs to be very prudent about all this. Stay out of this conflict. Don't take sides. Condemn terrorism on principle, but don't take sides over here. And yeah, yep, that's the deal. We have to be careful. Otherwise, we will sleepwalk into WW3, which we do not want at all. Please, we don't want that. Okay. Pain says, is Russia's hypersonic missile capacity and China's naval power superior to that of America? Look, good question. So the Americans were the pioneers of hypersonic missiles. What's a hypersonic missile? I think it's typically beyond Mach 5. Mach 1 means equal to the speed of sound. Mach 2 means twice the speed of sound. Supersonic is Mach 1 and beyond. I think hypersonic, if I'm not mistaken, is Mach 5 plus. And then you have re-entry speeds, ballistic speeds like Mach 23 and all that, which is what the Agni and various other ballistic missiles achieve on re-entry. That's a whole different story. So when we talk about hypersonic missiles, we're talking about cruise missiles. So we have BrahMos, which is a supersonic missile. It's typically Mach 2 or thereabouts. That's the speed of the BrahMos missile. And it's so large and it's got such a huge momentum that even if you don't put a warhead on the missile, just the impact of the missile at Mach 2 can slice a ship into two clean pieces. So then we have missiles like the Zircon missile, the Russian Zircon missile. We have what else do we have? The Kinjal and all that. So these are the Zircon for sure is a hypersonic missile, Mach 8, Mach 9 kind of thing. So the Russians have been investing, testing this technology, perfecting this technology. The Americans, they had this technology and they kind of shelved it. And right now they are not able to produce hypersonic missiles. That's the sense that I get. So Russia clearly is ahead of the US when it comes to hypersonic missiles. The Chinese also may have hypersonic missiles. Maybe. I don't remember exactly what the status is, but they definitely will be working on that. They have the Dongfeng missiles, the so-called carrier killer missiles, and so on. So that's about hypersonics. It's a pretty clear that Russia is ahead of the US when it comes to hypersonic missile technology. Where is India in this? We have supersonic missiles like the BrahMos. We are working on the BrahMos next generation NG, the BrahMos 2 and whatnot. So I'm sure there will be, you know, the future variants of BrahMos are most likely going to be hypersonic. Sure, okay. We're also working on certain other missiles which would also have hypersonic speeds. Now, when it comes to China's naval power, the Chinese have been investing in their navy since the early 90s. Okay, in the early 90s, their navy, the Americans considered the Chinese navy to be a joke. Ha ha ha. We can give them a very bad afternoon, and that will be the end of the Chinese navy. But the Chinese have been steadily building up their navy. These days, they are in a position to churn out destroyers and warships like sausages. So they probably have the largest navy in the world, the Chinese today, numerically speaking. Okay, and they also have this. Um, the what do you call it, the coast guard fleet and the merchant navy, merchant fleet, that also kind of doubles up as the Chinese navy. So they you can you can take any kind of ship, any kind of surface vessel, and put soldiers on it, or machine guns on it, and you can even jerry rig a reasonably decent sized merchant vessel and put missiles, anti-ship missiles or whatever missiles on it. The Chinese have been doing that. So if you look at it numerically, the Chinese have probably the world's largest navy. I'm not sure still if China is still there when it comes to the lethality of the navy. When it comes to the actual lethality and capacity of a navy, you don't count the number of ships, you count the number of missiles it can deploy at any given point in time. Okay, so from that perspective, the Chinese are kind of perhaps neck to neck with the Japanese, and maybe perhaps still be below the capacity of the US Navy, perhaps. Okay, they also they do have these VLS Tube 64 and all that on various warships, various destroyers. They have very large destroyers as well. So they are obviously, quantity has a quality of its own, like Joseph Stalin used to say. So the Chinese are following the dictum, and I think very soon, at least in the region that the Chinese are interested in, they already have numerical superiority. So the region they're interested in is the Champa Sea, which is erroneously called the South China Sea. Okay, they want this entire region to be a Chinese lake, and they obviously want Taiwan. So this is where they are focusing, and they are also worried about Japan. Japan has a tremendously scary navy from the Chinese perspective. Okay, South Korea is a US possession, so the US Navy and various assets will be there. So the Chinese are worried about that. The standard old island chain terminology, the three island chains that they worry about, all the way to Guam. Where is Guam? Okay, Guam is somewhere out here. Not this far. Somewhere here. Where is Guam? Here is Guam. Yeah, here is Guam. Okay, not that far. So three island chains that the Chinese worry about, and that's why they are pushing out, churning out warships like sausages. But the good thing for India is that they are all tied up over here because of the very strong US presence there, because of the very strong Japanese navy, and the problem of Taiwan. Philippines also, these days they have acquired certain very interesting weapons like supersonic missiles from a nation not far from India. So yeah, that's the deal. Indonesia also may want certain supersonic anti-ship missiles. uh, so I think the Americans have kind of missed a few tricks in the past couple of decades. They were full of hubris after 1991, after the breakup of the USSR. There was this unipolar moment that extended all the way into the 2010s until 2012, 2015 or so. But now there are big threats for the US on the horizon. The Russians have stolen a march when it comes to hypersonic missile technology. The Chinese have a huge navy now. Okay, so yeah, that's the deal. So that is indeed the challenges that the US faces right now. Okay, let's see. Tejas, what does Tejas have to say? Hi, Tejas. So, India had relations with other countries in the past. Egypt, Rome, and others are known to have knowledge about sea routes. Then, why did Vasco da Gama and others, why were they finding routes to India? Okay, good question. Let's take a look at the map all over again. So, when we talk about Egypt, Egypt is right here. Okay, it's not really far from India. Well, so Egypt in the old days, Egyptian civilization, it kind of extended into Sudan and all that. And to travel from India to Egypt, there are two major ways of doing it. First is overland. You go, so historically Pakistan was India. You go west of Pakistan, we enter Iran, which is still kind of more or less part of the Indian subcontinent, and a very, you could say, very similar culture and all that. So you go west from Iran, you enter Mesopotamia, and then you're at the doorstep of Egypt. So you can just walk over to Egypt. It will take you maybe a couple of months, okay, if you are walking from India with a number of people and a number of cattle. It may take you a month or two to reach Egypt if you walk a decent distance every day and you're reasonably fit. The other way is to go by sea, and Indians obviously were good sailors. So then you would go from what we call the Gulf of Aden, the Red Sea, and then you would reach Egypt. So the Egyptians obviously traded with India. It's well known. We have the introgression of Indian Zebu cattle in Egypt 2000 BC, which is 4,000 years before today. So ancient relations with Egypt, with Mesopotamia. It's right here. We can just walk there, right? And we know that India traded with Rome. We have found lots of Indian artifacts in Rome, in Herculaneum, in Pompeii, and so on. Uh, so when it comes to going to Rome, Indians would probably not have taken the land route. They would have taken the sea route, okay, possibly, and use the Mediterranean Sea to reach there. Okay, let's not go into the specifics of exactly what route they would have taken. So now what happened? Why did Vasco da Gama and others have to find a route to India? So majorly the trade that happened between India and Europe, it happened via land. So it would be the land route, okay, probably between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. Go via the Caucasus and enter Eastern Europe, and then go all the way to Western Europe. So we had well established land route between India and the Western world, and Europe. So the event that precipitated this need for Vasco da Gama and others to find an alternate sea route, that event was the introgression of these nomadic Turkic tribes people into the Anatolia and this region, which is now called Turkey. The Turks did not live there. The Turks were a Central Asian nomadic people, okay, closely genetically and culturally allied with the Mongolic peoples. And at some point in time in the past 1200 years, the Turks became Islamized, and that kind of gave them rocket fuel to go and conquer everywhere. And about which year was the fall of Constantinople? Whichever year that was, I think it was in the 15th century. 1453, was it? The fall of Constantinople, which was the culmination of the Turkic invasions of this region. So once the Turkic tribes took over Anatolia and what we now call Turkey, and established their empire, the Ottoman Empire, that empire, they see the Turks were very hostile to the Europeans, okay? And they cut off the land route between India and Europe. And that is why the Europeans were forced to now start looking for an alternate route to India. And in those days, we did not have the Suez Canal, between Port Said and Al Suez. It's an artificial canal. So they were forced to look for an alternate sea route to India. And Cristoforo Colombo went looking for India in the wrong direction. He ended up discovering, becoming, I mean, he didn't discover it. It was already there. There were people living there. But he was the first, let's say, European Christian, first Christian, okay, to discover the Americas. Before Christopher Columbus, the Vikings, obviously, the Nordic travelers, they did discover North America. They found, they had a settlement in Los Omedos, in the northeast of North America, and so on. That's a whole different story. So Christopher Columbus was looking for India. He ended up discovering the Americas for the Europeans, and obviously eventually Vasco da Gama found the land route, the sea route to India, with the help of an Indian sailor, and that's the story. Okay, so that is the reason why, even though in ancient times you had trade between India and Egypt, trade between India and Mesopotamia, trade between India and Rome, but because of the cutting off of the land route by the Ottomans. That's why they were forced to find a long circuitous route, sea route to India. Okay. Gaming lover says, will India be a car centric society or a public transportation based society? India has a population of 1.4 billion. India is an enormous nation. If everybody has a car, or even one family has a car, imagine the number of millions of cars you will have on the streets. Okay. And imagine the kind of pollution it gives out. And imagine how congested the roads will be. I think India should invest in very efficient public transportation systems that are comfortable, enjoyable, and get you to your destination on time. We have these cities, like one example is Bangalore is a beautiful city, great climate, but it's a small town that organically grew big and became a global hub of the IT industry and startups and all that. But the streets are so narrow that it's very difficult to travel in Bangalore by road. And everybody obviously wants to have a car of their own, and see that creates so many problems. So ideally what you should have is very good public transport, maybe metro, maybe underground railway, or whatever. Yeah, which is high speed, very comfortable, a pleasant experience, and will get you on there on time. And if it can, cater to the entire population of large cities, I mean, nothing like it. So I would say that, every Indian aspires to have a car and all that. Please don't do that. But yeah, unless you have no option, you will have to get a car, right? So I think over time, the Indian government will have to find solutions that eliminate the need for people to buy private transportation, and hopefully go towards public transportation that is great, that is really enjoyable, pleasant experience, and quick and fast. Yep. Jay Arjun says, what about Chinese occupied Mongolia and how Chinese Han dynasty people suppressed Mongolian language and culture? Well, that's a very long story, but yeah, you are absolutely right. If you look at the map, there is a significant part of Mongolia that is under Chinese occupation. The Chinese call it Inner Mongolia. Let's search it for it. Inner Mongolia. It's part of China. For what reason? I don't know. So okay, so they're not demarcating the boundaries. Google is kind of aiding China in this. So yeah, I would say roughly half of Mongolia is currently under Chinese occupation. Okay. And obviously, over there, it's the Chinese language that rules the roost. So if you're a Mongolian kid in Inner Mongolia, you have to learn the Chinese language, and your schooling most likely is going to be in the Chinese language. And you're going to be taught the Chinese Communist Party values of atheism and all that. They will suppress Mongolian Buddhism, and all that must be happening. I even remember seeing in the news a few years ago, like not a very long time ago, the Chinese government was trying to suppress any mentions of the great conqueror Sri Chinggis Khan and so on. The Chinese are very worried about any um, resurgence in the popularity of Sri Chinggis Khan. I wonder why. Maybe because he conquered China and smashed and smashed the Chinese empire and created his own Chinese dynasty, a conquest dynasty, the Yuan dynasty, so on. So yes, you are right. Roughly half of Mongolia is currently under Chinese occupation, and I hope that they also get their land back and their freedom back. So if you look at China, it's an enormous nation today, but a very significant portion of this land is just territory that's been conquered by the Chinese Communist Party under Mao Zedong. Yeah, so that is indeed the case, and you are right. Um, okay, what else do we have? Um, Samarth Gandhi says, is Iran trying to use the engineered crisis in the Middle East for nuke sneakout? What is Iran planning to do further? US conducting another nuclear test already sounds scary. I'm not sure if the US has conducted a nuclear test or if they are planning to do so. Look, if the Americans or any of the great powers goes ahead and conducts a nuclear test today, it's going to be a green signal for everyone to go ahead and do it. So I'm sure the US will take that into consideration. So the main question is about Iran. Is Iran trying to use the crisis in the Middle East for a nuke sneak out? So once again, let's go to the Middle East and see the map to orient ourselves. Iran is our great neighbor. I mean, big neighbor. I mean, currently we have a temporary nation in between, but historically it's been our neighbor for the past 4-5 thousand years. So Iran, as we know, is an aspiring nuclear power. They have a nuclear program, and the objective of the nuclear program, whether people like it or not, is to build nuclear weapons. Iran wants to become a nuclear weapons power. Okay, and the Americans and the Iranians had this deal, the JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which Mr. Trump walked away from unilaterally. So that gave Iran well, it freed up Iran to go and resume its attempts to enrich uranium to weapons grade quality, and they've been doing it for quite some time. They have these facilities, these centrifuges that process uranium hexafluoride and enrich uranium. Okay, and it's been going on for quite a few years. The Americans have tried various means of preventing the Iranians from doing this, from obtaining sufficient enriched uranium. You had the Stuxnet virus that they had introduced into these facilities like Natanz, etc. So my point is, Iran is an aspiring nuclear power, and they have been enriching uranium for quite some time. I think it is possible they may have sufficient enriched uranium for a nuke or two. They definitely will have sufficient radioactive material, fissile material, to construct what is called a dirty bomb. So a dirty bomb is not a nuclear device. The explosive material in a dirty bomb is conventional explosive. Okay, but it what you do is, instead of shrapnel, you add some radioactive material to the bomb, so that when it explodes, it kind of vaporizes the radioactive material and disperses it over a large area. Like, you could a terrorist organization could do it in a city and contaminate the whole city, and create huge problems. So Iran definitely will have enough radioactive material to build a few dirty bombs, but they may also have possibly sufficient enriched uranium to maybe, assemble a, a couple of nukes, maybe two or three tactical nukes, tactical five, I don't know, 10, 20 kiloton Hiroshima level bombs. They may have it. Okay. Uh, and that's what makes this entire crisis so very dangerous, because you see, what's happening is that Israel has been over the past couple of years sending ammunition to Ukraine. As we may have forgotten, but there's this war going on in Ukraine, right? And the entire Western world has been supplying Ukraine with arms and ammunition. And Israel has also sent ammunition to Ukraine, because of which Israel may perhaps be low on ammunition. And if Israel faces the prospect of a two-front war with Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, okay, and if other nations get involved in this, then Israel may suddenly find itself in a very tight spot where it's running out of ammunition. And then what does it do? In such a situation, they could ask their great benefactor, the US, to target some of these nations, and that could, lead to a confrontation, military confrontation, kinetic confrontation between the US and Iran. And Iran is not a pushover. Iran has sufficient quantities of weapons and ammunition. They have been supplying Russia with drones and loitering munitions in the war against Israel, proxy war over there. So Iran is not quite a pushover, and if the US starts any military action with Iran, Iran may target various US military bases in the region, including in Qatar, right? And that would make things very difficult for the US and for Israel. And if Israel finds itself in a position where its very existence is in under threat, then they always have what they call the Samson option. Okay, so Israel is an undeclared nuclear weapons power. Everyone knows they have nukes, maybe 70, 80 nuclear weapons, maybe 100. We don't know the number, okay? But it's roughly around 70, 80, maybe 100. And if they find themselves in a situation where they're about to be overrun, they could go nuclear and they could hit all these nations. And if there's a nuclear exchange, if let's say they nuke Iran, and Iran has, let's say, two or three nukes, they're going to lob them back at Israel, and this could start a nuclear exchange. And when we're talking about Iran, Iran is part of a coalition that involves Russia as well as China. So if Iran is targeted, you could have Russian involvement in this matter. Russia, as we know, have been are the benefactors of the Assad regime in Syria. The Americans, if they had their way, they would have taken Assad out and installed a puppet regime in Syria. The Russians prevented that from happening. There was this terrible civil war in Syria. We all know what's happened in the past 10, 15 years, which kind of spilled over everywhere in this region. The Latakia base, where is it? Latakia is a big naval base where you have a significant Russian presence. So this is a complex geopolitical and military environment. A misstep here or there could bring in a much larger conflict that involves powers that don't really belong here, but they are here. Yeah, so that's the situation, quite complex, and that's just where we are right now. Okay. Harsh says temples in India have always been in the control of the government. What's your opinion on this? The government has no business controlling temples. Okay, the government does not control the places of worship of other religions, of the so-called minority religions, or so Islamic places of worship. The government has no say in that. The they stay out of it. When it comes to other religions like Sikh Dharma or Jaina Dharma or Bauddha Dharma, or the other Abrahamic religion, Christianity, the government stays out of their places of worship. But when it comes to us, the major civilizational religion that came out of India, what is called Hinduism, Hindu Dharma, the government controls the places of worship and extracts all the money out of them, whatever people donate. This is an abomination. That's why I have always said that India is the most Hindu phobic nation in the world, and Hindus are second class citizens, or I don't know what class citizens in India. I think it's an abomination that this is a situation. It's essentially India is essentially a Hindu phobic apartheid state. Okay, and it's unacceptable that this still continues in the 21st century. All right. What else do we have? Shyam says, is the fear of hostages holding Israel back from an all-out attack in the tunnels? Look, tunnels are by nature stealthy. They're covered. They're hidden. Okay. And most likely Hamas will have the entrances of the tunnels under various buildings, maybe schools, maybe universities, maybe hospitals. That's what they do, right? So it's almost impossible for Israel to use satellite imagery and all that stuff to find out where the tunnels begin and where they end. It's only they would have to actually invade Gaza physically, put boots on the ground, and conduct a building by building, neighborhood by neighborhood search to find where the tunnels are. Okay, so that's number one, why the Israelis are not able to attack tunnels. Of course, they may have spies in Gaza, and they may have some human intelligence, which would enable them to take out certain tunnels, or to destroy certain tunnels. But most of the tunnels are very well hidden, I would imagine. Okay, that's number one. And when it comes to the hostages, the Hamas terrorists have taken a large number of Israeli hostages, men, women, children, all that. I would imagine that Israel has lived in a very tough neighborhood for a very long time. I would imagine that Israel would have taken the tough decision and written these hostages off. What that means is that they must have said to themselves that it's very unfortunate, but we have to consider these hostages as dead, and then only can they. Otherwise, the hands of their military will be tied. They won't be able to do anything. They'll have to take every step very carefully, and they can be blackmailed. The thing is, you don't negotiate with terrorists. You do not fall prey to the blackmail of terrorists. This is something that India has learned the hard way. You had the Indian Airlines hijacking, right? Remember a couple of decades ago, in which Pakistani terrorists hijacked an Indian Airlines plane, which took off from Kathmandu. Then I think it was a completely botched operation from the Indian government, okay, because we negotiated with terrorists. And eventually the plane ends up in Amritsar. It takes off we allowed it to take off from Amritsar. It went, I think, to Kandahar in Afghanistan. And you had the Taliban 1.0 in power over there. Okay. And the Indian government sent another plane and these people were asking for the rescue, for the release of various hostages, of various terrorists who were in prison in Indian prisons. And the Indian government went ahead and did this, right? Including some of the great major terrorists who live in Pakistan today. So this is something you should never do. It shows that you are a weak state, a soft state. Israel is the opposite of a soft state. India is no longer a soft state, by the way. Okay, India is a nation that hits back, but Israel is the original hard state. They don't negotiate with terrorists. If you take hostages, they're gonna come after you, and even if the hostages die, they're gonna come after you. So I don't think this fear of hostages is holding Israel back from an all-out attack in the tunnels. Maybe it is other considerations. It's definitely not a fear of the hostages getting killed. I think they have most likely written off those hostages. Okay. Dutch van der Linde says, if Trump gets re-elected in 2024, will we see any noticeable changes in the geopolitical situation in the world, which is quite messed up as two different wars are going on at the same time? Yeah, we have the Middle East war, Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, that's going on, and we have the the Ukraine war as well. Look, let's say hypothetically President Trump, POTUS 45, becomes POTUS 47, okay, which means that he's re-elected in 2024. Will we see any major geopolitical changes as a consequence? I don't think so. I don't think so. And why do I say this? It's because the POTUS 45 presidency has shown us a lot of things. POTUS 45, the 46th president is Biden. Mr. Biden. Is anybody under the illusion that Biden is running the country? Biden is a geriatric. Okay, he's way past gone mentally. Okay, I don't know what he suffers from, most likely dementia or whatever. He's in no position to run a household, let alone run a country. And if you look at his vice president, I mean, in case the president is incapacitated or mentally gone, then the vice president should step in. Well, the vice president is Miss Kamala Harris, who herself is clearly, demonstrably incompetent. So neither the president nor the vice president are running the country, but someone's running the country. Okay, so this episode has told us that the US president is not the person who actually runs the country. There is something, I mean, everyone knows it's there. It's what's called the deep state, the foreign policy establishment, and the military industrial complex establishment, which essentially is run out of the Pentagon, right? That's what really runs the country. It's an unelected regime that is never out of power. Okay, whoever is the president essentially serves a very specific role of keeping attention away from where power really resides. So, and if you look at Trump's first presidency, 2016 to 2020, he was not allowed to do anything that he wanted. He wanted to build a wall with Mexico, didn't happen. He wanted to drain the swamp in Washington D.C. Well, the swamp is very much there. He was not able to do to even do a pinprick on the swamp. He was able to do nothing. Okay, his own party turned against him. Why is this? It's because he's an outsider. He's not a career politician. He's a businessman. He's a billionaire, and he somehow accidentally won the presidency. And the US political establishment, I'm sure they see this as a mistake that they will not allow to happen again. So first of all, I don't really see Trump winning 24. But even if he does succeed in winning 24, I don't think he's going to be able to effect any significant change in US foreign policy. I don't think it's going to happen. Okay. So I don't think there'll be any noticeable changes in the geopolitical situation in the world. Well, as the president, you can order your troops to do this or do that, but if it does happen, it's going to be very minor, very insignificant. And the way the US is embroiled in various wars, it's very hard to extricate itself out of it. Right now, obviously, they are not fighting the Ukraine war themselves, but we know how things are. So I think it's going to be, it's not going to make much, a very, very major change if Trump does come to power again. All right. Explain about Native Americans. The Native Americans are the true inhabitants and the true natives of the Americas. What are the Americas? These are the Americas, North America and South America, which are connected by this region, the Isthmus of Panama. Okay, so the Native Americans are the people who lived, who still live. Some of them still live there, but the people who are the original natives of these regions, way before the Europeans, the whites, came into the picture. So the first known contact between Europeans and the people of the Americas happened about 1,000 years ago, when Eric the Red, a Viking explorer, first glimpsed the coast of Newfoundland in northeastern America, okay, North America. And it was his son Leif Erikson who made first landfall, who actually landed on the coast. And then the Vikings, they established at least one settlement called Lance aux Meadows in Newfoundland, and they encountered natives whom they called Skrylings. And then you later on, I don't know what happened to those settlements and those people. Maybe they got assimilated into the native population or not. We don't know. And then you had the invasion, which starts with the genocide that Christopher Columbus perpetrated on the natives of what they call Hispaniola, the Carib, the Arawak people, and all that. And then you have the Spaniards who ravaged South America, and then you have the French and the English who ravage North America. And conservative estimates tell you that the genocide was at least 56 million individuals over a period of 100 or 200 years. Most likely it was in excess of 100 million. Okay. And they also wiped out the North American wild bison so as to destroy the Native American economy and to destroy the Native American way of life. So the Native Americans are, well, they are people who are closely related to the Siberian, Tungusic, and Mongolic peoples. Okay. And they most likely crossed over. Most likely, I'm saying, most likely, not 100%, we're not 100% sure, but they most likely crossed over the Bering Strait during the last ice age, about maybe 15,000 years ago, when this entire region was frozen over, and you could just walk in to North America. But it's not like that's where so it doesn't mean that North America and South America were settled and the process began only 13,000 years ago, because we have found evidence of human settlements in South America that go back more than 100,000 years, more than 100,000 years. So history is very complicated. We are still finding new evidence. But yeah, that in brief is the deal about the Native Americans. They are the true natives of America. They are now marginalized very badly, especially in North America. They are not even second class, they're third class citizens. They are forced to live on reservations. Do you want to see reservations? Let's look at reservations. Look at this Mescalero reservation, and you can see you can see the shape, straight lines. It's land that's been kept aside for these Native Americans, and they are forced to live on that. And they essentially, it's third world conditions over there, while the invaders and the settlers live in great comfort and all that. You have this Navajo Indian reservation, the Pueblo people, the Canoncito Indian reservation, and you see this all across the US. Okay, so the Americans, the government will say that we have set aside land for the Native Americans, we treat them with dignity and all that, but actually they are marginalized very badly. There's terrible racism against them. The police are very harsh on them, and it's just a horror story. Okay, and these are the nations that lecture the world about human rights. So there we have it. Okay. So this is a question I get like 20 times a day. Ducati Ragnarok says, when will India take back Pakistan occupied Kashmir from Pakistan? Look, patience. Dhairya rakhiye. Patience rakhiye. Let's be patient. What is the ideal way of India getting back POK or whatever we want? Do we want to go and fight and fire shots and may perhaps lose a few soldiers? We don't want to do that. The ideal situation is where Pakistan disintegrates on its own without any action from India, and then you just walk in and take back what is yours. That is the ideal situation. Okay, so it should happen spontaneously, organically from within Pakistan, without any Indian military involvement, and that can be engineered over time. I don't see Pakistan playing more than one more World Cup cricket. Okay, this is the 2023 World Cup that we are playing right now. World Cup in 2027. I don't see them playing the 2031 World Cup. I don't think Pakistan will exist by the time. So it's all about India rising. Okay, and as India rises, the foreign interference in the region will decline, and eventually a stage will come where Pakistan will, because of its own internal problems, break apart on its own. I mean, so It's so we need to be patient, and we need to get this done in the most ideal manner without firing a single shot, ideally. Noman Ratnani says the recent protests in POK, is it something done by Raw? I would say no, no, no. We Indians are very peace loving people. We don't interfere in the internal affairs of other nations. These protests in POK are happening because, truthfully, because the people are oppressed very badly by the ISI, by the Pakistan military. Okay, people are sick and tired in POK about the situation and what's happening there. Look, you go to POK, and the people there can see across the border how the situation is. Across the border in free Jammu and Kashmir, which is Indian Jammu and Kashmir, you will find that everybody has a great standard of living. Everybody has electricity. Everybody has schools. There are roads built everywhere. The border roads organization is working day and night to build more and more infrastructure. The situation is brilliant. It's superb. Every kid goes to school. Everything is great. And across the border in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, the situation is dire. Okay, people are oppressed. There are no schools, there are no hospitals. Okay, there is no electricity, there are no roads, and wherever you have something, you have the heavy boot of the Pakistani military on your back. So people are genuinely in POK sick and tired of this occupation. They can see how much better things are for their brothers and sisters across the line of control, and they would want that for themselves. Okay, so that's why they're protesting. They're just fed up of the Pakistani occupation. They have realized that all of this was a lie, that the Pakistan will give us freedom and whatever rights. What have they got? What have they got from Pakistan? And look at the situation in free Jammu and Kashmir, in which is with India, where it belongs, right? So I don't think it's done by raw or anything. I genuinely don't think it's done by raw. It's genuine, spontaneous frustration and anger, and people are just fed up of Pakistan. And that's why I say that give it time, Pakistan will break up on its own. Okay. Um, 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 um. Anurag, okay, we back, come back to the Middle East. What's your thought that will the US take advantage of the Israel-Palestine conflict by attacking Iran? Maybe, maybe their development of military seems the same way. Look, it is a possibility. The Americans have always wanted to take revenge on Iran for the what they call the Iran hostage crisis after 1979, when the Ayatollahs took over. There was the Islamic Revolution in Iran. The U.S. embassy was besieged by students and protesters and Iranians and the Iranian government, and a large number of U.S. diplomats and operatives, okay, were taken as hostages, and this lasted a very long time. After a very long time, they were released, but the Iranian regime looks upon the U.S. as Shaitan-e-Buzurg, the great devil, right? Uh, so the US has always wanted to punish Iran and put Iran in its place. And as we know, they have deployed, there are a very large number of US military bases and installations all around Iran, right? So they would obviously love to punish Iran, take military action against Iran, and effect a regime change in Tehran, and install a puppet government that is, more amenable to the US. That's always the dream, So it depends whether the US will be able to do this, to take advantage of the conflict or not. So they'll be able to do it if there is direct evidence, or they are able to produce any kind of evidence of Iranian involvement in the conflict. We know that Hamas and Hezbollah both have ties with Iran, but it will take more than that to precipitate U.S. kinetic military action against Iran. And it's not as easy as it sounds. I mean, look at the distance from, let's say, this point in the sea, in the Persian Gulf, to Tehran. It's 645 kilometers. It's a long distance. I mean, to target Tehran with fighter planes or whatever, it's not easy. You can use cruise missiles and all, but then your naval assets are also vulnerable. The Iranians have the ability to stealthily tail US warships and maybe target them. Okay, so it's not going to be a walkover. So there's going to be an element of caution, but yeah, that's the great dream of the US, to effect a regime change in Iran. Okay. Okay, Kunal Dingra says, how can trains like Vande Bharat and Namo Bharat help the Indian economy to prosper? It's all about connectivity. It's about connecting the nation and making it easy, really easy for Indians to travel from one place to another, and that is what bolsters the economy. So for the longest time, the Indian rail network was the same as what the British left behind. So the British built the Indian rail network, and this was the infrastructure of occupation and extraction. The purpose that the British had for building the Indian railways was to ensure that whatever materials and supplies and goods they were stealing from India, they were transported from the interior parts of India to the various Indian ports, like Madras, now Chennai, Bombay, now Mumbai, and so on. Right. So that was the whole point of the Indian railways that the British built. And after 1947, India almost built almost nothing more. It's only after in the past decade or so that we are seeing a significant uptick in the construction of highways and railways and all that. Now, it's not enough to have good, sufficient railway lines. You also need to have high speed railway. So trains like Vande Bharat and Namo Bharat are not exactly high speed trains, but semi high speed trains. So they do a much better job. Instead of traveling at 50 or 60 or 70 kilometers per hour, they may travel at 120, 130 kilometers per hour, maybe even 110, maybe even 100. There's a significant difference, and it makes things faster. So for an economy to really grow and to be really unleashed to its full potential, the entire nation needs to be interconnected. Let's say you're a business person sitting in let's say you're sitting in Tirupati, okay, and you have a business idea and you need to go to, let's say you need to go to Jorhat in Assam. Now, typically you will have to take a train or something, but so a plane, okay, and that's where all the airports also come in. That so many airports are being built on a very on a war footing. But even if you have a high speed train or semi high speed train that can offset the traveling time, then it really helps you in your business, and it accelerates the growth of your business. And there are certain sectors, okay, in which let's say you want to travel from, let's say, from Mumbai to Pune, okay. So if you want to fly to Pune, you have to go to the airport. You have to go there at least 2 hours before the flight takes off. Uh, and traveling to the airport will take 1 hour, so that's 3 hours gone. And Mumbai to Pune will be maybe 45 minutes or half an hour or something. So the total traveling time for you from the time you step out of your house is at least 4 hours. And if you have a semi high speed train that can get you there in, let's say, 2 hours, I mean, isn't it better? And that too in comfort. So that's where all these trains come in, Vande Bharat, Namo Bharat, and all that. And the more of these train routes that we build, the more the Indian population will be integrated together, and the economy will also be unleashed because of that. So that's what these high speed rail networks and all that do. That's what happened in China, and that's what truly unleashed Japan. Okay, the Japanese economy was truly unleashed in the 1950s and 1960s with the building of the Shinkansen, whatever they call it, the Japanese high speed trains, which totally connected Japan from one end to the other, and it totally unleashed the Japanese economy. So that's what these high speed trains do, and that's what India is investing in with very good reason. All right. What? Okay. Ajit says, I have noticed that Hittite kings and city names are very similar to Sanskrit names like Pithana, Anitta, Kushara. How similar was this language in that time period? Okay. So the Hittite Empire or kingdom, whatever you want to call it, it's something that existed about around 1500 BC. Where did it exist? It existed in northern Syria and Anatolia, in western Mesopotamia. Okay, in this region, and you had the Hittites, and you also had the Mitanni, and both of these kingdoms were ruled. So the people, they spoke the Hittite language. Okay, let's retrack or retrace it. I think the Hittite language was what is classified as an Indo-Iranian language. Okay, and well, when we say Indo-Iranian, Indo-European, sorry. So it has its origins in the oldest known Indo-European language, and the oldest known Indo-European language is obviously Vedic Sanskrit and maybe pre-Vedic Sanskrit. And you also had the Mitanni Empire. The Mitanni Empire had an Indo-Aryan Sanskrit-speaking aristocracy or ruling class. Okay, so this region, it is clear that about 4,000 or so years ago, or maybe 3,500 years ago, Indians traveled out of India westwards and settled in this region. And we also have corroborated, supporting evidence, which is that the same exact time where these Indian origin kingdoms arise over here, you have the introgression of the Indian Zebu cattle in this region, and they eventually make their way into Egypt and so on and so forth. Long story. So the Hittites were of Indian origin. The Mitanni rulers were also of Indian origin. Okay, and that's why you have these names. If you see the names of the Mitanni rulers, for example, you have Tvesharatha, you have Parthatva, you have all these Sanskrit origin names, and you have this horse training manual by Kikuli, a horse master of the Mitanni, who writes in the Hurrian language. But there are certain terms in which he doesn't have the words, because the Hurrian language doesn't have those words, those technical words, and therefore he has to use his own native language for that. Sanskrit terminology, Navavartana, and so on and so forth. Numbers and various technical terms for horse training and all that. So that's the oldest attested evidence of written Sanskrit, actually, which we find in this region, in Syria, northern Syria and Mesopotamia. And the capital city of the Mitanni, it was called Vashukhanni, which is the mine of wealth in Sanskrit. So yeah, very interesting history story, and it's something that we should actually look into in greater depth. Okay, what else do we have? Umac says, your thoughts on the archaeobotanical findings of custard apple in Bharat confirm the baratiya-american contact. I'm not sure. I've not really studied this, and I've not looked into this in detail. It's something new that I'm learning because of this comment. So I will look it up, and maybe next time I'll speak about this. You even have, Columbus discovered the Americas in what? In 1498, was it? Or whichever year it was, somewhere around that time, late 15th century. Okay, and we know that maize, the plant, the crop maize, is a South American crop. Okay, South American crop. But if you look at ways, there are certain temple inscriptions in India, carvings of maize that predate the so-called discovery of the Americas by Columbus. So yeah, there are lots of pieces of circumstantial evidence here and there that kind of tell you that there is more to all this than meets the eye, and maybe the Indians had contact with the Americas long before the Europeans came to know about the Americas. It's possible. Right. Devansh Desai says, when we search zero was invented by which country, Mesopotamia appears, what the hell is going on? Is it some propaganda? Look, when you search on a search engine, it's gonna only give you what the prevalent wisdom is. And in the West, the prevalent wisdom is that India did nothing, and it's everything good came out of somewhere else. They even say that the oldest Indo-European language is some random Anatolian language or something. So they try to take the credit out of India, away from India, for everything, for mathematics, for zero, for the oldest Indo-European language, and so on. So it's propaganda. It's what their historians propagate, and because it's the prevalent wisdom and the prevalent narrative in the West, that's why it always appears on top of all of your search engines and all that. So let's not get swayed by this. We know it's propaganda. It is. All right. What else do we have? There are lots of interesting questions. Aditya Ravi Kumar says, how can India implement Sanskrit as the national language? The goal is for people to be able to see, speak, and read Sanskrit even in the village. How do we accomplish this? It's going to take time. It's going to be politically very fraught, because there is this very strong anti-Sanskrit, anti-Hinduism movement that's been built up by the Dravidian politicians in southern India. Okay. There's very strong sentiment that's been built up and inculcated through the media, through the political class, through various media narratives and the education system. Okay, and because of this, a very significant percentage of the people in southern India, they see Sanskrit as a foreign imposition on them. Okay, even though it is the Cholas and the various other such kings and dynasties, that promoted Hinduism and Sanskrit, and took it to a very large extent across Southeast Asia. So yeah, that's the thing. So there's a very significant percentage of the population in India that is very strongly opposed to Sanskrit. So it's going to take time for us to be able to do this. We will need a strong government, and we will need to decolonize the minds of Indians. Sanskrit is the language, the civilizational language of all of India, north, south, east, west, all of it. Okay, it's not some foreign imposition. But you say this to somebody in southern India, especially in Tamil Nadu, they'll come and they'll see you as the enemy. You are an invader. You are trying to impose your culture on us. Ours is a separate culture. It's a secular culture. We never had Hinduism and Brahminism and all that nonsense they'll talk. And the justification for all of this is the Aryan invasion theory, which is still taught as gospel truth in India's schools, colleges, and universities. So it's multiple generation. It's a multiple generational indoctrination and brainwashing that has been done to our people by the education system, by unscrupulous politicians who are doing it for their own benefit. And that's where we find ourselves today. So it's going to be very difficult to do it immediately. Maybe it'll take another, I don't know how many years. We'll need a very strong leadership in India to be able to start this process. Okay. And if it is to be implemented, it has to be implemented in phases. It has to be done through the education system. So year one, what you do is you introduce Sanskrit as the native language in the first year of education, what we call kindergarten, nursery. The next year you pass it on to what they call junior KG, then senior KG, standard 1. So it will take a process of 20 years before this you can do this. But 20 years is a very short period of time in the bigger scheme of things. So that's how you do it. Yeah, it has to be done through the education system. Through nowhere else will we be able to do this. But it's gonna take time, and it's gonna take the right kind of political climate to be able to achieve this, and for us to decolonize properly. Because our great civilizational export has been Sanskrit and Hinduism, right? Throughout the world, especially throughout Southeast Asia, Eastern Asia, and all that. Even Japan. Shaheen Wahman Zadegan, Durud Bair Shoma. Greetings. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, Tushar says, how long will this Gaza conflict last, and how is India going to be affected by this? So listen, I hope it doesn't last long, but you never know. It could last long, especially if other nations get involved and it becomes a slow, long simmering conflict like what you have in Ukraine. Then it could last for a long time, which would be terrible for the people who live in this region. How is India going to be affected by this? Look, if the conflict expands beyond where it is, it engulfs, let's say, Iran, Saudi Arabia, all that, then it's going to be a disaster for the world economy, because most of the energy of the world, the oil and gas comes from here. Saudi Arabia and Iran, they're two of the major oil exporters. India, the UAE also could get affected by this, right? Oman, Yemen, all that. We have excellent relations with Saudi Arabia. If Saudi Arabia, let's say, is at war for whatever reason, and if the Iranians are at war with the US, and let's say they choke off, they cut off the Strait of Hormuz, which connects the Persian Gulf with the Indian Ocean, then that could send oil prices skyrocketing. It could be a big problem for India. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing is that one of the major outcomes of the G20 summit, okay, was the India, Middle East, Europe trade and transportation corridor, which was supposed to hit the ground running and start within a month of the end of the summit. The Saudis wanted the construction to start right away, but this IMEC, this corridor, was supposed to pass through the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, and then move on to Greece and bypass Turkey. But now that this conflict is happening exactly in the wrong place, the India, Middle East, Europe trade and transportation corridor, its construction will not start now. So this corridor was supposed to be a game changer, a genuine, viable alternative to the Chinese Belt and Road BRI thing, right? But see, now it's not happening right now. It may still happen in the future once things settle down, hopefully. So these are various ways in which India is going to be affected by this, and not just India, but the whole world. Because let's say in the next, by 2030, we have a very strong corridor ready over here, the IMEC. And it's going to benefit India, it's going to benefit Europe, and it's going to benefit the Middle East region as well, the Gulf region as well. And India could similarly create another corridor which will connect India all the way to Japan or Australia, even Australia, in some way or the other. Uh, Multimodal corridor. So yeah, so these conflicts, especially the conflict that happens in the Middle East region, it's going to have repercussions all across the world. So just that's just two or three ways in which India is going to be affected by this, and not just India but the entire world. Yeah. So you gotta. So these things are important, and India needs to keep a very close watch on what's happening and be proactive in taking actions to prevent too much of this problem from spilling over and affecting India. Anisha says Maldives new PM has given ultimatum for Indians to leave. Your views about Maldives and India relations in the future? Look, Maldives is kind of a place where you have this geopolitical proxy conflict happening between India and China. Okay, so the Maldives are essentially an extension of the Lakshadweep archipelago. If you go west of Kerala, you have the Lakshadweep archipelago, and that is it's something that goes right into the Maldives archipelago, which goes all the way south. And actually, the end point of the Maldives is Diego Garcia, which is currently occupied by the Americans and the British. Okay, that's a whole different story. So Maldives is a strategically important region, country, nation, whatever you want to call it. And historically, it's been part of the Indian civilization, Indian subcontinent, right? Now, the Chinese have been eyeing this region for a very long time. The Chinese, as we know, they have been trying to encircle India at sea by creating this string of naval bases that kind of encircles India. Uh, they have Hambantota in Sri Lanka. We all know this, I'm sure. The good old string of pearls strategy. And Maldives is one of the components that they would like to incorporate into the string of pearls. So Maldives is a place where you have this proxy conflict happening between India and China. The Chinese are very good at this. They will simply offer unlimited amounts of money to a politician who is pliable and willing to do their bidding. So there are certain politicians in Maldives, certain parties that are pro-China, and some are more nationalistic and pro-India. So now there's this new election, and this new prime minister has come in, and he wants Indians to leave. So what India needs to do is India needs to get stronger. India needs to build its economy, build up its navy. Okay, this see the Indian government, Indian Navy keeps on saying that the Indian Ocean region is our strategic backyard. Well, words and slogans will not make it India's strategic backyard. We need to have a significant, not significant, a massive naval presence, a visible naval presence in this region at all times. So whenever a foreign ship sails through this region, they should see the Indian presence and say that, oh my God, now, yeah, this is a place where you have Indians everywhere. Indian naval assets everywhere. So that's what India needs to do. Once India does that, the Chinese presence will naturally decrease. Okay. And because it is close to India, we will have the upper hand. And then once you have the upper hand navally and your navy is present everywhere, these local politicians will also behave themselves. They'll be more inclined to behave themselves and be more pro India. And of course, India needs to play the diplomatic game as well. And whatever the Chinese do, we need to counter that in a variety of ways. So right now, Maldives is a place, like I said earlier, that the Sahel region of Africa is kind of the place where the new Cold War is unfolding. It's being played out between the US, between France, between Russia and China. Everybody is vying for supremacy in every country over here. Similarly, a similar thing is happening in the Maldives between India and China. So if India plays its cards right, then the Chinese will slowly lose their influence in the region. Similarly, we are seeing something similar happening in Nepal as well. And because of the blunders of the Indian government in the 1990s, the Hindu monarchy of Nepal was destroyed, and the Maoists, the communists, the anti-Indian terrorists essentially came to power in Nepal. But that's what happened. And because of this, Nepal kind of became more and more pro-China. That's the situation today. It's entirely because of the stupid, ridiculous policies of the Indian government of that time. So yeah, so there are lots of problems that we are facing today, which are a consequence of the blunders of previous governments. Now we have to find ways of solving them, and it's going to take time. So I would say that India and Maldives, the relations right now are kind of like this. Maldives is a place where you have a proxy conflict happening, a conflict, there is this battle for influence that's going on in the Maldives. It's going to be a while, maybe 10, 20 years before India can properly take the upper hand in this region. Okay. Okay, Sharar Chaudhary says, why hasn't Russia used its air force enough in Ukraine like Israel is doing now in Gaza? See, it's all because of what objectives Russia has in Ukraine. Russia does not want to flatten Ukraine and then take over a wasteland. Okay, that's not what Russia wants. Russia may not even want to annex the whole of Ukraine or even half of Ukraine. Okay, let's go back to the map. So the Russians have taken over the Donbas region, right? Luhansk, Donetsk, all these regions. Uh, they had taken Kharkiv also. They withdrew from there, and it's a long story. So Russia, I don't think they ever wanted to flatten Ukraine, destroy Ukraine completely, and then take over a wasteland. They have even tried their best to minimize civilian casualties. Of course, in a war, civilians will unfortunately die. Okay, that's just the nature of warfare. But they did their best from day one to minimize civilian casualties. So typically, let's say when the Americans invaded Iraq in 1991 or 2003, what they did was they slammed millions of, I would not say millions, but tens of thousands of tons of bombs, hundreds of thousands of tons of bombs into cities like Baghdad with no consideration for civilian casualties. And they live streamed everything on CNN, right? So that's what the Americans do. They use what they call the shock and awe tactics. They flatten entire nations, and then they make sure that no civilian casualties are shown on TV. That's what they do. The Russians did not want that at all. They wanted to take Ukraine as intact as possible. Ideally, they just want to change the regime in Kiev, get rid of Zelensky, and put a puppet government in place, which would be pro-Russia, and then make sure that Ukraine becomes a neutral power, which is essentially a buffer against the NATO regions in the West. That's what Russia wants. And of course, they don't want to risk their air assets. They have a very powerful air force, but they don't want to risk it. They have used helicopters and maybe a few Sukhois or MiGs here and there, older versions, but they have not really used the air force. So, what is the Russian objective? The Russian objective is to effect regime change in Kiev, get rid of the Western influence in Ukraine, and make and install a pro-Russia puppet government in Kiev. Get rid of Zelensky. Okay, Zelensky can go and live in the West and enjoy his billions. And maybe some part of Ukraine, maybe Western Ukraine, could even eventually reunify with Poland, and that's a whole different story, which we will not go into right now. So that's what Russia actually wants, and they want to do this with minimum casualties. Obviously, casualties are going to be high if you have a 2 year plus war, which it is like right now. But they want to have as few casualties as possible. They want to fight as little as possible and achieve their objectives while doing so. Um, and now things are meandering in Ukraine, as we know, right? Right now, the whole focus is down south in the Middle East region, in Israel and Gaza. The billions of dollars that were flowing into Ukraine from the US, that money is now slowing down to a trickle, and very soon, and Ukraine has suffered such incredible catastrophic losses in its armed forces that the armed forces are very badly depleted. They are completely dependent on the West for arms and ammunition and all kinds of supplies. Now that is slowing down to a trickle. So now it's essentially, unless the supplies start again, it's essentially a matter of time before Ukraine falls. Okay, and the Russians will eventually just be able to walk into Kiev and change the regime or do something like that. It may take 6 months, it may take the next 3 years, but if things continue the way they are right now, that's what's going to happen. So then why you use the air force? Just let it just be patient and wait for Ukraine to fall into your lap. That would be the Russian perspective on this. So that's why Russia has not used its air force. It does. The Russian government, I don't think they see the Ukrainians as enemies. They see the Ukrainians as their own people, which they actually are. Okay. So these are the reasons why they are not behaving the way Israel is behaving in Gaza, or the way the US has behaved historically in whatever nations it has invaded. All right. Benzene says, why is it so difficult to produce crystal blades for fighter jet engines? So, when you have a fighter jet or any jet engine, you inside a jet engine, you have incredibly high temperatures, way higher than the melting point of steel or iron or whatever. And you have very high pressures as well. And your turbine blades need to be able to withstand those temperatures and perform for hours and hours at a stretch. Okay, and then do that all over again, and then all over again every time the plane flies. So you need to be able to produce materials that whose properties are such that they can withstand incredibly high temperatures and pressure that would destroy any normal steel uh, blade or aluminum or I don't know, whatever, right? So you need exotic materials. You need to be able to build exotic materials. So what they do is that they produce these turbine blades out of a single crystal of metal, a single crystal. And that crystal has to be grown from a nucleation point. If you study chemistry or material science, that crystal is grown inside out of a single nucleation point. And it's a very, well, it's very high tech. It's a very difficult process. Okay. And uh, this technology is something that's being developed in the West. Certain companies have this technology. Rolls Royce, I'm sure they have it. Safran of France has it. And certain other nations would have it. It's something they've only been able to develop through lots of trial and error, and this process took decades. It took decades. Okay, so that's the deal. It's not easy to produce jet engines that can produce that can perform at the highest level. Yeah, it's a process of painstaking trial and error. You need to invest in material science. You need to invest in ceramics. You need to invest in exotic materials. You need a big research pool of scientists who do all this research. You need to invest in the right kind of labs, invest hundreds of millions of dollars in building these labs and having all this technology. It takes time and takes a lot of money and a lot of effort. Okay, and obviously when it comes to India, the previous governments were all about, okay, we don't have it, why should we develop it on our own? Let's just buy it and we'll actually make some money in the process. Let's buy jet engines. Why make our own jet engine? Why develop our own fighter planes? Let's just buy fighter planes and we'll get nice kickbacks. So that's how it's always been in India. A lot of corruption, I mean, they just didn't care about the nation. I'm not s- singling out or pointing fingers at any specific government or individual. I'm just saying that's how it was generally, and that has changed only in the recent past. And now, if we were to start the process of developing, a jet engine that would be able to that we could use on, let's say, the AMCA or any other future fighter plane, that process could take at least a decade, maybe 2 decades. That's just how it is. It takes time. It's not something that you throw money at it and throw money. Let's say I throw $500 million at it, and then in 6 months I'll get a jet engine. That's not how it works. It takes time. So that's why it's so difficult. It's such a difficult technology. It's such uh, that's the technology is so advanced. Okay, it takes a lot of trial and error. So that's just how it is. Arunima Srivastav says, I'm from Nepal. My country is suffering from Christian missionaries. They started converting Hindus hugely. Muslim population also increasing here. It's scary. Look, I'm aware. This entire process started after the earthquake. So you had this earthquake in Nepal. Which year was it? A few years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Terrible earthquake in Nepal. Lots of people died, lots of destruction. And I could see this chatter on social media among the evangelist groups that these Nepalese temples have fallen down. Now churches should come up in their place. So that's just what they do. They're called soul vultures, right? I mean, I have nothing against a person converting from one religion to another. If that need for conversion, that spiritual need comes from within, it should be your own choice. But what these people do is that they go to these poverty stricken countries, or countries where some recent tragedy like an earthquake has happened, and in exchange for aid they require the people to convert. That's what they do. That's why they're called soul vultures. So this is horrible, and looks like the Nepalese government is turning a blind eye to this. So it's very unfortunate. Yeah, so I'm glad that you are mentioning this here. The world needs to know that the indigenous culture is under threat. The indigenous culture that's 10,000 plus years old, the indigenous Nepalese culture, Hinduism is under threat. They're trying to eradicate it, which is happening in other parts of India also. But I think we are a very ancient civilization, all of us, and eventually, in the long run, we will prevail. Especially as India gets more powerful, we'll be able to hopefully give some aid, the right kind of aid, to all of our neighbors, all of our spiritual, civilizational brethren. So yeah, I hope things get better, but currently that's the situation. That is indeed the situation. Yeah. uh, um uh, Giuseppe the Friar, one second, let me just deal with an individual. Okay. Giuseppe the Friar says, how can I please stop simping and worshipping women? As male simp for women. Women's rights issues. Sometimes I get accused of being a male simp. Can you please teach me on how to stop? I don't know. I mean, there's nothing wrong with liking women. I mean, I guess what you mean by simping is you put too much value in the other person or something like that. I guess what you need to do is become more confident and develop yourself as an individual, and see that there is a huge amount of value in yourself as well, so that you don't feel like you are worthless and every other person, let's say women, are like a million times more valuable than you. See, all humans have some intrinsic value, and it is something we can develop on our own. So I would say that if you feel this way, maybe you feel some sense of inadequacy in yourself because of whatever reason. I don't know what it could or could not be, because I don't know you personally. I would say try and introspect and find and ask yourself, what is it you feel about yourself? Where do you feel that you're inadequate? And then work on that. You can always grow as an individual and grow as a human being. And whatever your weaknesses are, you can turn them into your strength as well. So for example, just a random example, maybe you feel that you're not physically strong enough. I'm just saying, some people may feel that way. Well, go to the gym, lift weights, eat well, give it 6 months, and you will be a different person, or 1 year or 2 years, right? So it's something you can all work on yourselves. I would just say that introspect, spend some time understanding yourself, understanding who you are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, where you feel that you're inadequate, and then work on that. Give it time. You won't change over a week's time. Give yourself 2 years. In 2 years, you'll be a totally transformed person if you are consistent in working on yourself. So that's what I would say. So the main thing is, you have value, good value, intrinsic value. Every human being has value on their own, and everybody has strengths and weaknesses. You got to work on your strengths and try to eliminate. You can't eliminate all weaknesses, but you can reduce them. So that's what I would say. Shantanu Jha says, will India get a permanent seat in the UN and have veto power? How many years will it take according to you? I simply don't care if India gets or doesn't get a permanent seat in the UN or has veto power. The thing is this: see, the UN Security Council permanent members, there are 5 of them, and that situation represents the way the world was in 1945, almost a century ago. So it reflects an outdated, obsolete world order. Okay, my point is this: I simply don't care whether we get this UN permanent seat or not, because if we if we become strong enough, then it won't matter whether we have a seat or not, because our strength itself will be such that this veto power won't matter. We'll have a de facto veto power in the world if we're strong enough, if we become a $20 trillion economy or $25 trillion economy. um, India eventually, if we play our cards right, we're going to be the largest economy in the world in this century. When you are the largest economy in the world, you're going to have a military that is proportional to that strength. And then you have a veto, whether people give you a veto or not, you have it on your own. So my point is, stop begging for the UN permanent the seat in the UN Security Council. Stop lobbying for it. Stop craving for it. Work on yourself. Like I said, that is, you got to identify your strengths and weaknesses. We have tremendous potential in India. We can rise to unimaginable levels if we all work together. So that's what we need to focus on. Give it some time. The world is yours, and this won't matter anymore. Okay. Okay, lots of other questions. Lots of other questions. What else? Uh, okay, let's say this. Indian rupee is falling day by day. Really? Is it? Can you explain how the value is decided? And is this a concern for India or is it befitting us? Let me go and let us go to our friend Mr. Google and look at the Indian rupee. Okay, INR to USD. Is it falling really? Let's see this. INR to USD. Um, what about 5 years? It's not really falling continuously, but yeah, you could say that yeah, over time it has fallen. It has fallen over time. So how does this happen? See, in a free floating market, the it all depends on the demand that you have. Obviously, when you have the US dollar is a paper currency, it's a fiat currency, it's something that is the world's reserve currency, and it can be manipulated by the Americans uh, at will. So yeah, this is a complex topic, and I'm not quite an expert in economics, but I would say that there are lots of things India can do to strengthen the Indian currency. One of the ways is to buy up more gold. The other way is to increase your GDP, the output. There are lots of things we can do. I don't think this is overall a matter of great concern, unless the rupee falls precipitously, which would indicate a serious systemic problem. For example, Pakistani rupee to USD, you will see that Pakistani rupee. So that is a total disaster. You can see it's fallen. Pakistan rupee to INR. I mean, even that, if you see, you can see how badly it's fallen, and the fall begins sometime in 2016, 2017. So these are complex things, but I don't see this as a matter of concern. This is a long term game, and eventually the Indian rupee will do well. What the Americans are doing is at any given point in time, if they feel that they need to manipulate the global economy in a certain way, they will print a few trillion dollars here and there. Just invent money out of thin air in your computers. That's what the Americans do, and because their currency is the reserve currency, they have the power to do it. Eventually, it won't be that way. The world is now kind of tired of this situation, and the process of de-dollarization may actually happen in the next 10, 20 years. So yeah. Okay. Aryan Shah says, yeah, let's talk about aliens. What do you think about alien bodies found in Mexico? Well, look, there's this claim, okay, that alien mummies have been found in Mexico. And I don't know who it was, but some university in Mexico and so on, they came out with this claim. They put out some videos and some images and all that. Okay. So that's a claim. They have made a claim. Now, here's the scientific process. When someone makes a claim, that claim has to be independently verified. So another team of scientists, or maybe multiple teams of scientists who are unrelated and unconnected with the people making the claim, these other teams of scientists should be given the same information, the same data, the same evidence, and they should be asked to examine it independently and give their own scientific opinion based on scientific testing and evidence, whether these are actual alien artifacts or whether these are fabrications. So that is called peer review, the proper way of doing peer review, independent peer review. That's not happened. So so when you make a claim but you don't allow anyone to either prove it or debunk it, that's just a claim, and that cannot be taken as gospel truth. It cannot be taken as proven, right? So that's my perspective on this. What do I think? I think somebody has made a claim, but we don't know if the claim is true, is a genuine claim, or whether it is a fabrication. I would say it's more likely it's a fabrication, given the entire history of these claims of alien visitations and all that. Till today, nobody has been able to prove with beyond, you know, give incontrovertible proof of any alien presence on this planet. Not a single one. I mean, people give you photographs, people give you videos, but it's typically grainy photographs taken by one person, or blurry videos taken by one person. Okay, why doesn't it ever happen that there is this alien phenomenon, that's a UFO or whatever, that happens in Mumbai, and like 50,000 people see it at the same time, and they all take out their phones and capture it? That's genuine, because 50,000 people saw it at the same time. Or why doesn't it happen over Tokyo or Mexico City? Why is it always some random isolated place where one person takes a picture? So that's why I am very skeptical about these things. So what do I think about these alien bodies, this claim? I'm very skeptical. Okay, they, if it is genuinely the case they found something, they should make it these artifacts and this evidence available to teams of scientists from across the world. Let 5 different teams, independent teams of scientists, come and examine the evidence and do whatever tests they want to do, and then give their own report of what they think this is based on empirical evidence. That's not happening, and that's why I'm very skeptical. When will India have a great leader who will unite the subcontinent? Maybe it is going to happen sooner rather than later. Okay, we may be going in the direction where such leaders may already be there. They may actually even be known to people, but that they will know how good of a leader or not they are only when they actually come to power. But I think we are going in that direction. Indians are becoming more and more aware of history. Indians are becoming more and more aware of the great history of Indian civilization. There is more and more pride that is slowly awakening among Indians of all across India. And when this happens, the quality of leadership goes up, and leaders also have to, justify. When a leader comes to power, they also have to live up to the expectations of the people. So I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later, that you will have a great leader who may unify the subcontinent. I will not give it time frames and all, because who knows, I'm not Nostradamus, but yeah, there are these geopolitical experts who make predictions, and then they go on Twitter and everywhere and say, see, I predicted this, I predicted that. I don't do predictions, I do analysis. So okay. uh Anik says, why is there no update on the Russia-Ukraine conflict? Nothing new is happening over there. Is this a sign of major attack or operation by Russia coming up? Like I said, this is a conflict that's meandering, and now the West seems to be losing interest in Ukraine. Ukraine was always a disposable asset for them. It's like a pawn sacrifice on the chessboard. Zelensky is another disposable minion for them. And look, I think right now the amount of Western aid that's flowing into Ukraine is now slowing down to a trickle, whether it is money, whether it is arms, whether it is ammunition. And when the ammunition runs out, then how do you fight? How do you fight a war? So that's what's happening. Nothing much is happening there. The Russians are not trying to do any major escalation of the war. They're just trying to wait this out. And they just want to wait until Ukraine has nothing left. No arms, no ammunition, no soldiers. Yeah, that's what the Russians are waiting for. They're waiting for Ukraine to fall into their lap. I mean, why go and fight a terrible battles when you can just wait for 2-3 years and everything will fall into your lap the way you want it? So that is what's happening right now. There's no major attack or operation that I see coming out. Obviously, I can be completely wrong, and Mr. Putin may prove me completely wrong and make me look like a fool. But from where things are today, I don't see any major Russian operation coming up. And maybe it's very stupid to say this because tomorrow something may come up. But let's see. Right. Okay. Okay. Where are we? Um. So once again, war between Russia and Ukraine, will it end by the end of this year? Who knows? Who knows? Look, we are already in October. October is ending now, but we've got 2 months left for this year. I don't think it's gonna. Most likely, it won't end by the end of this year. Most likely, it could end next year. It could take 3 months. It could take 3 years. Who knows, right? The way things go. But when certain specific conditions are uh, when certain conditions become true, when certain specific conditions are satisfied, the Russians will move in. Until then, they will not try to risk any major escalation. That's what I would say. And what conditions are these? That the Ukrainians run out of ammunition. Then you may have guns and all that. You don't have bullets, and what do you do? So the Russians can just walk in then, right? So that sort of thing. You win without fighting, ideally. Obviously, there's been a lot of fighting the past 2 years, but going forward, they want to minimize the fighting and take the country with minimal fighting. Okay. Yeah, Ayush, Qatar has wrongfully imprisoned our soldiers. How to deal with them? I spoke about this in depth in the beginning of this thing. So once this is over, you can rewatch that. Yeah, I spoke about that. Can you elaborate on Sri Nehruji's rejection of Nepal rejoining India? So yeah, in the 1950s, the king of Nepal, King Tribhuvan, wanted Nepal to rejoin India and become an Indian state. And Mr. Nehru, he rejected this proposal, right? And it's not me claiming this. It is former President Pranab Mukherjee has written about this in his book, by the way. Okay? Check it out. Check out the book. There's plenty of evidence that this actually happened. So what do I say? I don't know. I simply don't understand what Mr. Nehru was trying to do. Okay? With all his decisions. Giving away what 80% of the Indus River's waters to Pakistan, allowing supplying rice to the Chinese soldiers who were starving in their attempt to invade and conquer Tibet. He supplied rice to them. Okay, not taking any action when the Chinese built a road through Aksai Chin. I mean, I don't know what Mr. Nehru was doing. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on and on. Giving up Gwadar. He was given Gwadar for free by the Sultan of Oman. He said, no, we don't want it. I mean, giving up a significant portion of the kingdom of Manipur to the Burmese for no reason whatsoever, as if it is his own personal family property, giving away the Cocoa Islands to Burma. The list goes on. I mean, so I don't know. I mean, as the leader of a country, you have one job. Your job is to serve the nation and its people and ensure the long-term prosperity. Every action that you take should contribute to strengthening the nation and serving the nation's interests. With Mr. Nehru, every action that he took worked in the opposite way. It hurt India. It harmed India long term. I mean, he went to the UN and he prevented the Indian army from retaking POK. If he had waited another week, the Indian army would have taken POK back. And Mr. Nehru said, no, stop. So and that the consequences of that decision, we are still dealing with those consequences today. So I just don't know. I don't know. Somebody should perhaps psychoanalyze Mr. Nehru based on all the information that's available in the public domain. But I just don't know why he did these things. Okay, I simply don't know. I simply don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't compute. That's not what a leader is supposed to do, unless who knows what. Okay. Frustration is a real. Is dirham? Is a real? Is yuan? Is ruble? Dr. Jashankar Supremacy raises a very good question here. Yes, ma'am. How come patriotic Indian billionaires fund left-wing universities? Harvard University, for example. You have Indian billionaires who give significant donations to these universities, and these universities then use that money to fund anti-India narratives, anti-India research, Hindu-phobic research. Okay, and there are these private universities in India that are funded by Indian billionaires, and if you see the kind of goddamn research is being done there, all anti-India narratives, Hindu-phobic narratives. Okay, so then the real question is, are these Indian billionaires patriotic or are they anti-nationals? That's the question we have to ask ourselves. Yeah. So it is an indisputable fact that these billionaires fund these universities. Everyone knows this. It's out there in the public domain. Anyone can look it up. So then the only question is, what is the purpose and why are they doing it? Are they truly patriotic or are they anti-nationals? I leave the answer to yourself, to you all. I leave that answer to you. You are all wise enough to answer it. Let me know in the comments. Let me. Sorry, what is this? Let me know in the live chat. What do you think? Thoughts on Jordan Peterson? I right, Jordan Peterson. Uh, what do I think of him? A Christian fundamentalist, Christian supremacist, white supremacist. That's what I think of him. Okay, we have gone way past 2 hours, which is something we typically do. So with that done, let's take maybe one or two more questions. The World Economic Forum wants to destroy the diversity of humans rather than protecting every last nationality. You know what makes the world beautiful? Diversity is what makes the world beautiful. If you go travel across the world and you see people who wear the same clothes, who eat the same food and speak the same language and worship the same religion and watch the same TV shows and eat the same food, then what's the point of traveling? Everything becomes the same, dull, monotonous, uniform, a monoculture. What makes the world beautiful is this diversity of culture, diversity of ways of life, diversity of clothing, diversity of cuisine, diversity of languages, diversity of religions, diversities of point of view. That's what makes the world beautiful. And there are these forces in the world that want to destroy this diversity. So yeah, diversity is what makes the world beautiful and interesting, and we should cherish that and preserve that. um okay, let's take one last question. um Views on Yajnadevam Indus Valley script decipherment. Yeah, maybe I should get him on the podcast and have him explain it in detail, which will also uh, help me understand this better. So yeah, let me do that. Yep. um Thoughts on current India visit of Mahdi Hassan. So this Mahdi Hassan is a Hindu phobe. Okay, he thinks that Hindus are animals. He has made very crude, very unacceptable statements in the past. Okay, and he has been invited to India, to Mumbai, for the Tata Lit Fest, if I'm not mistaken. So there's this question asked by Dr. Jaishankar Supremacy, that lady, right, about Indian billionaires funding left-wing universities. Well, here you have the Tatas, an Indian billionaire group, who are funding the visit of an anti-India guy to India. So what does it tell you about the Tatas? What does it tell you about the Tatas? Right? Are they patriots or are they anti-nationals? I'm not saying anything. I'm asking a question. Please let me know what you think. Okay. Aishwarya Tripathi says it's my birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Fantastic. Bobby Epen says 2 states, 3 states, 2 states, 1 state solution of current situation. I do not even know what to say. 2 states seems to make sense, but then the point of the Palestinian movement is from the river to the sea. They want Palestine from the river to the sea. Okay, what do they mean by that? Let me explain what they mean by that. River to the sea. 1 second. Let me bring the map back on. Okay. The Palestinians want Palestine from the river to the sea. So, is that a 2 state solution, 3 state solution, 1 state solution? Which river are they talking about? They're talking about the river Jordan. Okay, the West Bank is the West Bank of the river Jordan. Where is this river? 1 second. Yeah. Where's the Jordan River? So, this is the Jordan River, right? From the river to the sea, they want Palestine. From this point all the way to the sea, which means they want the eradication and the destruction of the nation state of Israel. All of this they want it to be Israel. So who are the Palestinians are Arabs, aren't they? Aren't there enough Arab countries in the world? Do the Jews not deserve a single country? So I don't know. So let's say we go for a 2 state solution, we create a separate Palestine, separate Israel. Will the Palestinians be happy with that? It's kind of asking yourselves, okay, hypothetically in the 1990s, if the Indian government had given away Kashmir to Pakistan, would that have solved the India Pakistan problem? No. Pakistan will never be satisfied until they destroy the whole of India. The solution is the destruction of Pakistan. Right? So India-Pakistan was a two-state solution. But you still have this conflict. And the conflict will exist as long as Pakistan exists. So we are very clear now in India what the solution is. It's the disintegration of Pakistan, hopefully peacefully. Yeah. Now, so I don't know what's the solution to the Middle East thing, the Israel-Palestine thing. A fair solution would be a two-state solution, obviously. Yeah, give some land to the Palestinians, live there, you West Bank, Gaza, whatever it is, and let the Jews live in peace in the other part of the region. I mean, it is their ancestral homeland, Judea, right? But yeah, I don't think the Palestinians will be quite happy with that. They want the destruction of Israel. So this is I don't know what the solution is. Yeah, I don't know what the solution is right now. Okay. With that said, let us end today's live stream. Ask Abhijit 169. It's been 2 hours, 11 minutes and counting. Thank you so much for all of your questions. Obviously, there are so many questions I could not take, so I apologize to those of you whose questions I could not take. I apologize to those of you who asked questions in the comments and I could not take them, but I will keep on doing this, and we will continue this for the foreseeable future. The Ask Abhijit show. So thank you very much for your viewership, for your support, for everything. And I will see you as soon as I possibly can in the next episode. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. See you soon.